Hello ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for tuning into this short screen tutorial from historychappy.com. It's on the Unit 3 Edexcel GCSE History paper, in this case for my students, Britain 1931 to 1951, but whatever Unit 3 you're doing, if you're doing Edexcel GCSE History A, the exam technique will be applicable for you, so let's get into it. We'll go through each question, we'll look at an example, what the mark scheme says success looks like, and then we'll go through how I would structure it. But these are by no means binding. If you've got a better way or a different way that works for you, please do use those. Okay, so example question 1, study the source. What can you learn from the source about, in this case, German Bobby Red and Coventry? For top marks, it says here you're going to need 2 supported inferences. So this is how I'd structure it. You'd need 2 of these to get top marks. So the source suggests that, add your inference. Now an inference, as we know, is something that the source suggests without it directly telling you. The support is the quote or the extract from the source that supports your inference. So source suggests that, add your inference, because it says in the source, support your inference. Moreover, furthermore, reinforce it, just so the examiner is definitely clear that you've got your inference and you support it, then repeat that for a second time. So 2 supported inferences in this style should give you top marks as long as they're correct and accurate. Okay then. Question 2, 8 marker. What's the purpose or the point of the representation or the source? In this case, it's a newspaper article and you need to use some own knowledge as well. Quite often people forget to whack the own knowledge in. You must do that if you want top marks. If you don't, as you can see here, you're going to be stranded at 6 no matter how good your analysis is. So you need to use the content and you need to explain the context or give some own knowledge. If you don't, you're stranded at 6. So let's have a look. As we said here, you need to use detail from the source and your own knowledge of the context of the time, the place, what was happening in and around that time, as to why it was created. If you don't use that, obviously you're capped at 6. So what the key thing is to remember here, that every source in history is a man-made creation. It has been created for a specific purpose, to make you think in a certain way, to make you do something. So if you remember that, then all sources must have been created for a purpose, for a point. So if you get your head around that, you'll be absolutely fine. So this is how I'd structure it. The main purpose of the article, post or extract, whatever type of source it is, would be that explain the purpose there. The article was carefully selected, so here you need to forensically extract something from the source which supports why it was made. This is supported by the fact, again, you use some of your own knowledge, so link your own knowledge here to the specific part of the source that explains the purpose. Moreover, reinforce that. Therefore, the source was created to... There you go. So you don't necessarily need more than 1 paragraph here. You've just got to make sure that you are playing by the rules. So you're explaining the point, the reason it was made, its purpose. You're picking something out, at least one thing out of the source to support that. You're using really precise contextual knowledge to back up what you're saying. You then reinforce your point, maybe add another point. Then you just refer back to the real reason it was created so the examiner doesn't miss it. And remember, all sources are created for a purpose. Question 3 then. So you can use the source and some own knowledge to explain why something happened. So if you've got 2 factors here, excellent, you are in line for top marks. If you only have 1, you're limited at 8. But you must use, this is the key here, precise additional knowledge. So, or I call it specific contextual knowledge. So knowledge about the time that's not in the source that explains why something happened. This is how I would set it up. You need 2 factors. If you don't use your own knowledge, you're stranded. Factor 1, supportive own knowledge. Then a factor 2, supportive own knowledge. Link the source and own knowledge together and you will be laughing. So repeat the technique twice using own knowledge. So one reason this happened or occurred or took place is because this is supported by the source when it says, so use the source, which shows that, refer back to the reason it happened. Furthermore, there you go, nice and easy. So 2 P paragraphs, use the source, use your own knowledge. You should be in line for top marks as long as what you've put is technically correct. So here's an example about a different question. The first reason that the Ministry of Information Sensitive Communications was because, so you could use your own knowledge there. This is shown in source A, so then you're using the source, which demonstrates that linking to the question. Furthermore, just reinforce that. This is supported by, there you go. So 2 of those should be enough for top marks. Question 4 is, people often think this is tricky, but it's really not, because it's only worth 10 marks. People get caught up here where they write too much or spend too much time on the question. If you don't do that, you won't fall into trouble. So you're going to have 2 sources here, and you must use your own knowledge. You must state how reliable they are as evidence of something. All right. Now, people fall down because it's 2 sources you've got to consider and some own knowledge. Now, to get top marks, you must look at the content of both the sources and the NOP, so their nature, origin and purpose, okay? And you must also use knowledge of the context, when it happened, why it happened, to whom it happened, things about the source and around the source, but they're not necessarily in the source. Okay then, so you must look at the reliability of both of the content, so what's in them, and you must look at the stuff around them, who made them, where did they come from, what were they created for. And you must use some own knowledge somewhere on the way too. Now there's 2 potential ways I can think of that you could potentially structure this. Sort of 6 mini sections. So you give a judgment, how reliable they are. You could just discuss the content of both first, then the NOP of both, then give your overall judgment of how reliable they are. Alternatively, if you don't want to do it that way, if you want to do it sort of 1 source at a time, you could start with your introduction about how reliable they overall are and to what extent. You can then discuss the content and NOP of one of the sources. Then you could discuss the content of the NOP of the next one, and then give your judgment. Use your own knowledge in all sections to help you measure how reliable or unreliable those sources are as a set. There's a little sentence starter for you there. So you haven't got to write lots and lots here. A sentence or 2 for each part of that would be more than sufficient, because it's only for 10 marks, all right? So don't get carried away. Make sure you use both sources. You look at the content, you look at the context, and how reliable they are overall. Easy as that. The final question then, so you're going to have 3 sources and you've got to use your own knowledge, and you're going to get a statement here. It's probably taken from one of the sources, in this case source F, that suggests that civilian morale is badly affected by the Blitz. So how far do you agree with that interpretation? Now, the interpretation is going to be biased and one-sided in all likelihood. It's only going to tell half of the story. So what you've got to do is support that statement using the sources and own knowledge, challenge that statement, again using the sources and own knowledge, then come to some sort of, to what extent, how far, degrees judgment, which shows overall how far do you agree with that statement. That's probably going to be to a large or to a small extent, depending on the sources and what your own knowledge says in the question. So to get 15 or 16 marks, you are going to have to look at the strength of that evidence. So not just what the evidence is telling you, but how strong it is overall. So the quantitative weight of the evidence, is all the evidence suggesting one thing or is it suggesting the other? But alternatively, you've got to look at the NOP and the provenance. All the evidence might be suggesting that, yes, civilian morale was badly affected, but it might all be biased or partisan evidence from provenance that you can't trust, okay? So make sure you're looking at the content quantitatively and you're looking at the provenance qualitatively, okay? So then you come to some sort of judgment. This is how I would set it out. I would always introduce with a mini judgment on that hypothesis, yet to a large or to a small extent or to some extent. Support the statement, challenge the statement, reach a judgment. Here's some scaffolding here for sections 2 and 3. So to support and challenge, you could do something like this. So the statement is supported by sources or source XYZ. When it claims that, it's to suggest that it's reinforced by the fact, etc., etc. Make sure you bring in the content, nature, origin, and purpose, and some own knowledge too. Do that twice. Or alternatively, you could talk about each source one at a time, then reach a judgment. It's completely up to you. I do the support using the sources and unknown knowledge, then challenge the sources and unknown knowledge, then reach a judgment. But if you want to do it that one source at a time, source A says this, source B says this, source C, then reach a judgment, that's absolutely fine. But make sure you do reach a judgment whichever way you're going to do it, because this is where you really nail and answer the question. But make sure it's to a large, small, certain extent. It's never going to be a polarised judgment, completely yes, completely no. It's always going to be somewhere in between. History is not that simple. And remember, this scaffold is just a suggestion. If you've got a better alternative way that works for you, please do use that. Okay, I hope this has been useful for you. I've certainly enjoyed doing it. For this tutorial and many others, please visit my website, www.historychappy.com, and good luck in your exam. Okay, then thank you and